Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Pride and welcome to today's panel discussion, Out Stories, How We Got to Where We Are Now. The second in what I guess is now a series created by our LGBTQ plus employee resource group at Expleo. So today's discussion will be around self-disclosing one's sexual or gender identity, otherwise known as coming out. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Siobhan Smith. I'm Global Marketing Manager at Expleo. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a cisgender bisexual woman. I'd like to remind everyone this is a safe space without judgment. We're here to listen and we're here to learn. There may be some terminology that you don't understand throughout this meeting, and we'll do our best to explain that as we go along, but feel free to pop a question into the chat function and we'll get to as many as possible in the Q&A segment. So Pride is a great time to step back and take stock. It's important to use the time, I think, to listen, learn, reflect on what's happened in the past and our heritage, but also look around us, what's happening now and what will our future look like. If we've learned anything over the last couple of years, I think it's that progress is fragile. And therefore, I think it's important that we keep the spirit of the love and the passion of the protest that is LGBTQ plus Pride alive in every way that we can. So with that, the aim of today's event is twofold. First of all, we want to offer inspiration and hope to anyone who may be struggling with their sexual or gender identity. And also we want to enlighten and educate our colleagues and friends who are not part of the LGBTQ plus community about what it's like to face into coming out. And that is something that we don't do just once. So in Ireland, I think, without a doubt, we've seen immense change in the direction of being a more LGBTQ plus friendly country, with laws and social attitudes steadily moving in the right direction. However, as recently as this week, we can see with the burning of the Pride flag on Monday morning and the erection of posters for straight pride in an area of this country, we still have a lot of work to do. So through the art of storytelling like this, what we can do is we can convey a message to our allies and ignite a fire within our audience. And that's exactly what this discussion is about today. So I am thrilled to welcome an extraordinary panel of LGBTQ plus people to Expleo, albeit virtually once again, something I hadn't foreseen on our last virtual Pride event. But they're here to discuss the idea of coming out and the arc to how they got to where they are now in greater detail. So we have Laura Lavery, who's co-chair of Northern Ireland Working with Pride Network, and she's lead of PwCNI's LGBTQ plus network called Shine. Noah Halpen, Community Aid Officer for Healthcare at TENI, Transgender Equality Network Ireland. Lisa Connell, Managing Editor at Gay Community News, Ireland's national LGBTQ plus press. And Conrad Im, Sexual Health Worker with Sexual Health Centre Cork and former Mr. Gay Ireland. So welcome to the panel. Each of our esteemed guests today is going to speak for 10 minutes, all about their journey. And then what we'll do is we'll have Q&A at the end where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So I'd like to remind everyone that this session is being recorded, so please ensure that you're on mute and your video's off for the actual event. And without further ado, I will pass you over to our first speaker, who is Laura Lavery, PwC LGBTQ plus network and co-chair of the Working with Pride network in Northern Ireland. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Siobhan, and thank you so much for having me on today. It's really, really lovely to get to know you guys and to be part of this today. And certainly, I think that's something that virtual events have probably given us, is that chance to kind of connect with people that we maybe wouldn't necessarily. So thank you very much. So my name is Laura Lavery, and I think Siobhan's sort of given me a glowing introduction there. I have worked in PwC for about 7 years, led the Shine network for about half that time, but being part of it for a good bit. And as I say, as Siobhan said, I lead the Working with Pride network up in Belfast, and that's kind of a network of professional LGBT networks, and we all kind of share best practice and learn off each other and kind of would sort of work together on events and things like that. So it's a really lovely network to be a part of too. So whenever I was asked to come on this, and I was asked to kind of do a bit about my coming out story and what coming out means to me, I was thinking about it, and I really had it very lucky whenever I was younger in coming out. I didn't have a particularly traumatic coming out experience. I wasn't closeted for very long at all. So I kind of thought that I'd talk about today about how coming out and being out has changed for me over the years. I do think we go through phases, and as Siobhan said, you're never done coming out, but it feels different at different parts of your life. So So whenever I, like, for the first coming out, the big coming out, was whenever I was about 12 or 13. I really kind of clicked onto it then, and I could sort of hear my friends talking about boys, and thought they were all deranged because I was like, you're not seeing girls. So I didn't really have, in terms of being at school and my friends and stuff, I didn't really have much of a period of being in the closet. I had a few close friends that I was out to, and my best friend actually, she was gay too, and we kind of both came out to each other at the same time because we both confessed to having a crush on the PE teacher, which is like the biggest cliche ever, but brought us together. So it was really nice to have someone to kind of go through that with. I saw her journey, which is very different to mine. Like, her family couldn't find out. It really wasn't a great experience for her, but the whole way through school and everything, it was just kind of a non-issue for me. And it was really well received. And if anything, it was just sort of curiosity and questions more than anything else. And then I get, in terms of, family stuff, for a long time, it was sort of the great unspoken in our house. It was like that episode of Friends. I knew they knew, and they knew that I knew that they knew, but we didn't really talk about it much. I had a girlfriend for a couple of years whenever I was sort of 14, 15, and she stayed over, and mum and dad knew. It just sort of was, never really explicitly referred to. They welcomed her into the home and were great with her and everything, but they kind of saw at that stage the way she was treating me and kind of didn't really like it in that sense. But it was never to do with the fact that I was going out with a girl. It was the fact that I was going out with someone who wasn't treating me the way I thought, or they thought that I should be. So the only time it was ever really a conversation as such with my mum was, I had come in and she was sort of tidying around her bedroom, and I had come in to sit and chat, and she had just asked if I had met any nice guys, and I was like, no. And she said, what about any girls? And I said, no, not yet. And she thought so. And that was kind of the whole big coming out conversation. With my dad, it was a bit different. Like, he was always great. He didn't know how to talk about it, was the thing. So it was probably a couple of years after that we ever kind of sat down to talk about it. But I think it was probably a generational thing as well. He just didn't really know what to say or know if he was supposed to say anything, which I think, a lot of people do struggle with. It's one of those things that you don't generally talk about, your kid's sexuality if they're straight. So it's a very difficult thing then to kind of do if you've got a gay daughter. Pardon me. But I found out years later that at that time, he actually had a friend in work who was a lesbian, and spent a lot of time kind of talking to her and asking her how to be the best possible father to a lesbian daughter, and how to let me know that he loved me and he wouldn't change anything about me if he had that power, that magic wand. And she just sort of said, well, from here and the way you talk about her and the way you guys are together, she knows, don't worry about it. And she was so right, like I did. So that was kind of the sort of, again, a fairly smooth journey in terms of my family. And then when I was 18, I moved up to Belfast, and that was kind of a whole new sort of phase then. It was kind of, I went up and I was, I was never closeted. I never felt like I was coming out a lot. I had a lot of friends then from sort of through uni and a bar I worked in for a few years, but it was mostly straight friends. Like, I didn't have that LGBT community at that stage. And that wasn't a choice. It was just kind of worked at the bar, and there weren't many other gay people that worked there. My ex worked the door at the only gay bar in town, so I wasn't really on the scene much either. But kind of, I suppose at that period, I didn't really see being gay as a part of my identity. Like, I didn't hold that close to me. I didn't, as I say, I wasn't on the scene. I didn't have that sort of LGBT family. Even, the girls I was dating at that stage were straight. So it was in the background, but not something that I kind of claimed as my identity. And I stayed in hospitality for a long time, and I have to say that was always a really happy and safe space for me. And I never had any issues. I think, if anything, it was like guys making creepy comments and stuff, but kind of they did that to my straight friends as well. So I sort of just put that down to them being and it's. But then whenever I moved to, out of hospitality eventually and into, 9 to 5 and into the corporate world, I did have this sort of, for the first time, this wobble of, well, can I be me? Actually, in the same way that I have been in hospitality, can I be just out? Do I have to like tell everyone? Like, it doesn't come up in conversation. And I got, for the first time, a bit of nervousness around it. I thought, I probably, just from being an outsider to the whole sort of corporate world, that there was a way to be, that there was this sort of persona and you had to kind of really fit this mold. But whenever I got in there, it really wasn't like that. It was sort of, again, just something that there were a few people, again, didn't know how to talk about it much, and got a little bit uncomfortable, but never any sort of overt, homophobic comments or anything. And if anything, it was more of, trying to educate people where they were uncomfortable or awkward about it. But I still didn't see, any visible lesbians anywhere. And that was, at that stage, that was in all of PwC in Northern Ireland. There was one or two, over in the mainland in kind of the Shine network at that stage. But I just saw this kind of a lot of gay guys everywhere in terms of our network and stuff, and they were really active, but there didn't seem to be much representation in terms of women. So that's, at that stage I started joining the Shine network and getting involved with more internal and external LGBT events and stuff. And I think that was kind of the stage where, for me, I felt, okay, I've had a really, really easy year. I just got to be me and be gay, and that's just been accepted at every step of my life, really. And that's really when I started to feel a bit of a debt to the community, that, okay, well, you've had it so easy, you've got this privilege, and it is 100% a privilege, and I fully appreciate that. But there's so many people who don't have that, and who have it a lot harder for so many different reasons. So that's really, for me, having such an easy coming out, from the various different ways that you do, really drove me to want to get involved with the community. And, in the first instance, that was with Shine, our professional network, and driving sort of our three-pronged approaches to educate, engage, and connect people. And that, for me, has really helped bring the conversation to life in work about LGBT stuff, and made it a much more open conversation that everyone feels that they can join, which is important for kids, sorry, so condescending, for younger people joining the firm and coming through. But also then starting to reach out with external networks as well, and working with the likes of the Rainbow Project up in Northern Ireland. We're now working with Cara Friend to deliver anti-bullying workshops in schools with a specific LGBT focus. So for me, coming out was never a big thing, but it really, I think, looking back, has inspired me to try and make it that little bit easier for other people as well, because, I just basically got a free pass. So I think we can all do loads in terms of reaching out and helping people. But I think a big part of that, people sometimes underestimate the power of being out and being visible to other people, in realizing, I don't think that I'm much of a role model generally in life, but, that I maybe that one person that someone sees and goes, well, actually, she's gay and she's okay. So, maybe I can come out, maybe it'll be okay for me too. I think I've maybe gone over there, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm going to give you a virtual round of applause, because it's very hard to emulate what we could create in a room. But thank you so much for sharing your story, Laura. Really interesting story. I suppose, I think maybe it's getting easier as time goes by for people to come out, but it is funny how you did see that change then when you went into the corporate world. And I definitely think that there is definitely a way to go in the corporate world, and that's why things like companies getting behind Pride and making sure that they have internal supports for their LGBTQ+ people is so important. Big thank you for sharing your story, and also the story you shared about your dad was really touching. So thank you for being so open and honest with us all today. If there's any questions for Laura, we'll take them at the end, but we'll move swiftly on to our next speaker, Noah Halpen from Tenny, if you want to take the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be on today. So as Siobhan said, my name is Noah Halpen. I am a transgender man, and I am the Community Aid Officer in Healthcare for Tenny, the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. So yeah, my story starts kind of really quite young, in that I always knew, God, from a conscious age, from when I was very, very small, that there was something not wrong with me, but something different about me. I wasn't the same as the rest of the kids, and I was branded this tomboy, which I was, and that's what I kind of would have identified as a very young child growing up, because that's all I knew that I was. So my mother would always tell stories about, having to wrestle me into dresses on the floor with, arms and legs flailing and tears and snots and all that kind of stuff, for events and things. I was always, Action Man for Christmas, dressing up as, I don't know, an army man going into crash, things like that. And I never thought anything of it. And I don't think my parents really ever thought anything of it either. And of course, there can be, cis girls who are complete utter tomboys as well. But then I kind of entered secondary school, and I had gone to a co-ed primary school, but I was sent to an all-girls boarding school in secondary school, which I started finding extremely difficult. Kind of like what Laura said when all your friends were talking about boys and things like that. Now, I don't mean boys, I am a gay man, I love boys. But when all the girls were talking about, makeup and things like that, it wasn't important to me. I wasn't interested in the things that, the girls in the school were interested in. And what I always kind of say is I was trapped in this school because it was a boarding school, and I used to call it prison school. But we were kind of, ended up spending the majority of my time on the football pitch or in the art room, and things like that. And it was only when I was and I was trying to kind of discover, I was like, there's something different about me, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. I was kind of saying, am I a lesbian? Like, I knew I wasn't, because I was never attracted to women. I was, and then I was like, am I bi? I was like, no, and I couldn't figure it out. I just knew there was something there, and I didn't know what it was, and it was really kind of getting to me. And then when I was about 14, I saw a documentary about a young trans woman, and it was this light bulb moment that was just like, oh my God, I have spent years trying to figure out what this is. I didn't even know the term transgender. I didn't know there was a word for it. I didn't know it was a thing. And I just went, it wasn't kind of a scary thing. It wasn't like when I heard it, I wasn't kind of frightened. I was just relieved that, oh, there are people like me out there, and this is what I am. But realizing who I was didn't necessarily transcend into who I could be at that time. So, being stuck in this all girls boarding school, it really wasn't the right environment for me to come out in. I also didn't know anybody else who was trans, so I couldn't talk to anybody who was trans. And I went through that kind of those last few years in school kind of fairly miserable. Doing everything I could to get myself thrown out of the school, which I managed to do 4 months before my leaving cert, which was a stupid thing to do, but I still did my leaving cert by myself, so it was grand. But it was things like having to wear skirts, and the school that I was in was quite a prestigious school where we were all taught to be ladies and proper ladies and things like that. So being anything other than, a proper lady, as they used to call us, was really difficult. But then when I did leave school, I did that classic young Irish person thing, and I disappeared to Australia for a year and a half to 2 years. And when I was in Australia, I kind of thought, nobody here knows me. Nobody knows my history. Nobody knows anything about me. And I went and I cut my hair short, and I didn't use the name Noah, actually, I used a different name. But in Australia, and I just introduced myself as that. And nobody questioned it, nobody thought different. And I realized that I had never felt so free in my entire life as I did those couple of years. Now, of course, my mother was seeing photos and went crazy about me cutting off my hair and all that kind of stuff. But she wasn't there, and I didn't care, and went on with my life in Australia. But then when it was time to come home, I got scared, and I went straight back into that closet after experiencing a year and a half to 2 years of just being able to be me. And I don't know why I felt I couldn't say anything when I came back, but I just did. I just felt like I couldn't mention anything about being trans or things like that. And I went straight back into that closet. And sometimes I think it's harder to go back into a closet than it is to stay in it, sometimes. And my mental health dipped really badly those few years that I came back and I went back in the closet. And I was severely affected by that. And then, I just eventually, I really hit a very, very, very dark place. And I came to the realization that, you know what, you just need to be happy. And the way you can be happy is to be yourself. And it's not an inspirational story, but my first time I came out to anybody here that I know was after a heavy night of pints in the George, and sitting in Charlie's Chinese restaurant across the road at about 3:30 a.m. with a friend of mine, eating a 3-in-1. And I just said, I said to him, I'm trans. And he and he kind of just he stopped eating and he looked at me and he said, he was a makeup artist, and he said to me, I was expecting some shocked reaction, and he just said, but you're so good at doing makeup. And that was his response. And after that, I felt like telling everybody. I felt like shouting it from the rooftops. The first person I know that I told didn't react badly. So I decided, I started telling people. I just started telling friends. I started, sending texts. I was in college at the time. I think I sent a big, long, rambly text to the group chat in college, so that when I went in the next day, it was, and everyone was really great. But I still felt I couldn't tell my family. They were the last people to know. So I was actually living as Noah for over a year before I actually told my family. And I never really do choose the best of times to tell people things like this. But there was one day I was at home with my mum and I said, can we sit down at the table? I think she knew there was something like this coming. She said, oh no, I'm doing the dishwasher. And I said, just sit down for a second. And she said, I can't, no, I'm just in, I said, Mum, sit down. So I told her, and unfortunately her reaction was very much like, sorry, yeah. Unfortunately her reaction was just very much like, it's an attention thing. I know you, I know you're not that person, and things like that. And then we never ever mentioned it again for a couple of years. And I said it to my dad months later at a wedding when I had a load of pints down, a family wedding. All of my cousins already knew, all of my aunties and uncles at the wedding already knew. And my dad, I told him then, and he unfortunately had the same response as my mum. Was like, no, this is an attention thing. I know you, you're not trans or anything like that. And it went unsaid for about 2 years. Family events, anything, nobody would mention it. We never spoke about it again up until only like last year, when I kind of said, guys, we need to I am very clearly passing as male. In public, you keep referring to me as she and he, or she and her, and my previous name, which was undoubtedly, a female name. And I've found over the past year, they're slowly starting to change. They still haven't called me Noah yet, even though I've been out since 2015, 16. They still don't use he and him pronouns. But what they have done is they've stopped calling me my previous name, and they are now calling me a childhood nickname that I had, which is Rasher, which is, you wouldn't know. The issue is, even we were in a hotel last weekend sitting at a restaurant table, and my dad points at me and says, she'll order next. And the waitress looked behind me going, who's she? Like, who's he pointing at? And that's where it gets really awkward. But I have noticed that they are working on it. And, it's not done out of malice. It's done out of, they just don't understand. And, I do pull them up, but they are working on it. Things are slowly improving with my family. Whereas with my friends, I've had the most incredible, you know, I think what coming out has done for me is it has given me a family that I never had before, um, which is the most important thing for me. The most important thing that's ever happened for me is that, all of a sudden I came out, and all of a sudden I had this family, this chosen family that I never had before. Some of the best people in my entire life that would do anything for me, and I do anything for them. And I would happily, I have lost a few people after I came out, but I mean, I have gained so much more in coming out than I have lost. And, that's what I always say, is that I've never ever met anybody who regrets coming out.
Thank you so much, Noah, for telling your really interesting story. Actually, I related to a lot of your story because I was also part of that generation that went to Australia. But I think I went further into the closet in Australia, actually, which looking back was a silly idea because I was in my early 20s. I should have been as free as I could ever be in my life. But that is just the conditioning of my upbringing, I suppose. Um, Interesting, I suppose, how you talked about the secondary school and feeling so trapped, like the thoughts of, a young person having to go through that's very difficult. And hopefully I actually think there aren't many boarding schools left, but like I think schools are very quickly becoming things that we can point to for being progressive, and they're really moving in the right direction, which is just great to see for like the next generations. Another thing actually that jumped out at me, well, there was a couple of things that jumped out. The same thing that Laura pointed to about visibility in the community. Like you spoke about that documentary, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with like an event like this is being able to showcase, stories and real people and real lives, because that's something you are desperate for when you're trying to like grapple with the feelings that you're having and the thoughts going through your head and stuff. It's so important to kind of see that out there and know that it's normal and that it's okay, and that just because you don't fit in the box that society has prescribed for you doesn't mean you're any less of a person. So yeah, that all kind of really spoke to me, so thank you for being so honest and open. And like I said, we'll come back to your questions at the end. But next up we will move swiftly on to our next speaker. So delighted to welcome Lisa Connell. So she's managing editor of Gay Community News, also known as GCN. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. I thank you for inviting me to participate today, and to everybody else who's taken time to turn up, and also the other speakers. I suppose what I'd love to spend a moment, I'm a journalist, so we're really interested in stories and in storytelling and the power that has. And obviously GCN is Ireland's national LGBT press, and we've been publishing since 1988, and one of our more recent communications kind of marketing slogans has been reflecting queer life in Ireland since 1988. And on the face of it, that's very, I mean, obviously it is what we do, and it's very clear and immediate what that message means. But actually, when you are an LGBTQ+ person, when you drop down into how profound and serious that can be, both in positive and in negative ways. Also, I'm going to back up a little bit and say that I'm a very proud queer woman who uses she, her pronouns, and just to say that, because everyone else did. But yeah, so we, I suppose when Siobhan approached me and invited me to participate, coming out is such a pivotal moment for LGBTQ+ folks, and there's still such power and potency in it. And one thing I wanted to touch on before I share any of my own personal story is that, coming out is not a requirement either of a person for that identity. And I think that one thing I try to encourage in terms of our reporting and our coverage of LGBTQ+ people is that, and we work with a lot of younger writers, and we talk to them about the fact that you should only share what you're comfortable to share at any point, of course. And I mean, that obviously that goes for a lot of scenarios in our world, but I think that with increased visibility and representation, there can also be an increased pressure on a person to tell their story. And, if I get a little feisty for a minute, we don't have to tell anybody anything. And so, it's really important, I think, for us to really allow ourselves to stand into our own boundaries around that. And so, and also it's a gift if somebody is sharing kind of detail such as, say, what we've heard.
Have we lost Lisa, or is that just my computer?
I think it froze here for me too, Siobhan.
Oh no. Lisa, she might need to. Oh, you're back. You're back. Good.
Sorry, it just dropped there. So I think we have a really as a folk, as a type of people, we're really good at turning quite hard situations into fun anecdotes afterwards, or the time that elapses allows you to have a very light touch. But I suppose it's just to name the fact that those are hard yards to walk, and one other thing that in terms of visibility, we recently did a poster campaign with a quote from an amazing activist who lives in Ireland now, Evgeny Storn, and he said, our solidarity as a community, the quote is, our solidarity is in our visibility. And that resonated very deeply for me and the team at GCN, because it gets to the core of why we do tell our stories, why we do connect our communities and share. So in terms of my own journey, I came out when I was 20. When I was a kid, I had very little understanding of my difference, because I was different in lots of ways. And so and also I'm of a certain age where it was, I grew up in Donegal, so it's not exactly the LGBTQ plus mecca. And so quite honestly, as a child and a young person and a teenager, I simply didn't really understand that you could be gay, because I didn't know anybody that was gay, and I didn't, and also any examples I did see of it were all negative. So they were people, they were serial killers or creeps in movies, or, so again, I'm so interested in how the media represents us, because it tells us such really crazy things about ourselves. So I just really didn't know. I was just a really shy teenager, and I used to, I'm from Donegal, which is obviously on the border with Derry, and one of my little mechanisms as a teenager, because I didn't really know what was going on for me, I made up a boyfriend. So I had like an across the border boyfriend, but nobody ever met him because he didn't exist. But he was very real in all my stories. And so, but I guess it's that thing where often, and it's funny when you come out to somebody eventually and they say, well, I knew. I mean, I always find that a little confusing, because it's a weird thing for the LGBTQ plus person to hear, because they didn't know, or certainly hadn't, got to grips with it. So I studied, I went to university in Northern Ireland, and in the University of Ulster at Coleraine. And after college, I moved to Belfast. And in college, again, I was a straight person. But it was increasingly becoming clear to me that maybe I was not a very good straight person. And, again, because the idea of being queer was so removed, even though I was a theatre student, so it shouldn't have come as that much of a surprise, the jazz hands. But so anyway, I graduated college, moved to Belfast, and of course, as I think for a lot of people, my queerness or my coming out was forced by an external force, which was falling in love with somebody. And so actually very funny, I worked in a restaurant with my gay best friend, and the manager was this absolute babe, this gorgeous woman. And we were all out at the Kremlin one night. Laura, you'll know the Kremlin very well. And my gay best friend, John, came up to me and he said, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. Chantel just asked me if you are gay. And honestly, till this day, it plays back in slow-mo in my brain, because I grabbed him very aggressively by the arms and very dramatically, as only a 20-year-old can. I said, what did you say? And he, of course, said, well, I told her you were straight, right? You're straight. And the blood, like my face went white. I was so, it was the first time I was forced by an external factor to sort of get to grips with something. So I, like a lunatic, like I ran up to her, I went off and found her, and I said, hey, so, you know, you asked John a question, and she said, oh, sorry, I didn't know. And I said, well, I'm not. And she said, yeah, no, I know. He said you're straight. Sorry, I didn't. I said, I mean, I'm not straight. And she said, oh, okay, so you're gay? And I said, well, and it was so comedically, because I was also not able, like, it was still a big thing for me to name. And so I was saying, well, I'm not, and I'm not, you know, and it was a really, it was a challenge, because I had taken on the homophobia that I grew up with. So to be gay was to be weird and wrong and sort of perverted, actually, at my age bracket, because it was still very sort of stigmatized. So yeah, in classic kind of first gay love style, it was certainly falling in love with somebody really accelerated that process. And then I suppose I dated that person then for many years, which was lovely. And I was very, I was a non-seen queer person. Like, I didn't have a lot of connection into my community in Northern Ireland. And then we moved to Dublin together, and it was actually only after we broke up that I really, and I'm so glad no one named it, because I think for a lot of LGBTQ plus folks, our relationships with our biological families of origin can be complicated. Like, you're lucky, a lot of people have positive experiences, but a lot of people don't. And so there's certainly a very, I think, shared reality that, and I've heard a friend of ours, Philly McMahon, he describes it as, when you find your queer family, you find your logical family. And I think that's really beautiful, because when you do have a complicated connection into the idea of family or the makeup of family, then your queer friends and connections become so important. And so I'm very proud and lucky to say that I have a most gorgeous queer logical family of pals and of community, kind of, you know, all the people that we work with within the community. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm glad I was on mute there, because I think my cackle would have like overshone your discussion there. Like, so much in that story as well, to kind of draw on. And the one thing that you said is that you absolutely don't have to tell anyone anything you're not comfortable with. And I think, like, I don't think typically, like, I would be the type of person, you know, going out there like talking about these kind of topics in the workplace and stuff like that, if I didn't understand the struggles of the people before me to create the environment that I've experienced. And it's like what Laura said, it's that kind of debt of gratitude to go, right, well, we need to pay it forward to make sure that the next generation has it even better, you know. But there's certainly there should never be any pressure on anyone to have to tell their story or to have to talk about it or anything like that. Everyone's individual, and again, it comes down to who you are as a person and what kind of personality you have and all that. So thank you for pointing that out, because that's definitely not the message we want to send across with this event, Lisa. So like I said, question time coming up after our final speaker. So with that, I will hand over to Conrad Im, who's a sexual health worker at Sexual Health Cork, but possibly very impressively as well, possibly even more so, is that he's a former Mr. Gay Ireland. So welcome, and the stage is yours, Conrad.
Good, thanks for having me. So yeah, my name is Conrad. I use he, him pronouns, and as Siobhan was saying, I'm the LGBTI+ sexual health support worker for the Sexual Health Centre. But then as well, I'm also on the Cork Pride Committee, and I volunteer with the Gay Project in Cork and with the LGBT Youth Group, among others. For me, I was unsure if my story was relevant when I was first asked to do this, but Siobhan, I spoke to Siobhan about it, and we kind of came up with an idea of what I can discuss. So for me, I come from a big family, so I have 7 brothers. So I have 5 older and 2 younger. And I suppose people always expect that I have this big, massive coming out story, but I suppose I'm one of the lucky ones that never really had to come out. I call it a non-story because I've never had to come out of it, really. So suppose I have a cousin that's about 15 years older than me that was gay. My mother always had LGBT friends growing up. So I think it was more normalized in my environment growing up. And then as well, I went to like NOAA co-ed schools, and it was Irish language schools, so it was smaller classes at the time. And I suppose those schools were more progressive. I think, in fact, there's, I think, 5 people from my class of 19 who are actually LGBT and who are out right now. So it was very, very progressive secondary school, and I'm actually soon joining the board of the secondary school. And they as well had helped at the beginning of the Gay Straight Alliance project that I run with MTU Cork LGBT Society. So they're very involved and very active in supporting the community. I did interview my mother for the Cork Pride magazine recently to kind of ask questions about if she knew, if she had any plans for my life that might have been changed after I really didn't come out, I suppose. She kind of said that she always kind of knew that my brothers always knew, but there wasn't really an issue, that she was too busy with so many kids that she never really had a chance to sit down and plan her lives. So she wasn't expecting anything specific. I kind of just rocked up home at 17 with a boyfriend, and I was just kind of accepted, kind of like same as if my brothers came home with girlfriends or anything. So I suppose my mother said it was more of a struggle just to keep food on the table and to make sure we stay alive from day to day. As well, she had more concerns that we were kind of the first mixed race children in our community. My mother and father got married in the 70s, I think, and they had to actually advertise that they were going to get married because at the time the church were like, oh, your husband is Chinese, one of those foreigners, he could have more wives, so you need to advertise it nationally to see if any more wives come forward, which is ridiculous. But she's also like back in the 70s walking with my brothers in the prams and stuff, been spat at and called names because we're mixed race. So that was always more of a concern for her, she said, than being LGBT. And then I suppose she carried on then to just give advice to parents that, you know, to get involved in the community, to learn about what supports are there and to know what supports are around if your child does come out and needs support. I suppose I was also very lucky that I grew up with the likes of Siobhan O'Dowd, who runs the Cork LGBT Interagency. I went to the youth group in the community centre here locally that Siobhan is the coordinator of. And then as well, I had a chance of being mentored by people like Dave Roach and Clive Davis, and even my own manager, Catherine, in Sexual Health Centre, who I met when I first got Mr. Gay Cork 6 years ago now. So I'm very lucky to have that support and guidance as kind of a gay man in my 20s then. So yeah, I think my message really is more towards parents that coming out in Ireland has changed rapidly in the last few years, and that most of us now live just as boring lives as everyone else. And that if you are coming out, that your parents aren't, as Noah was saying, they're not always going to be this big, massive coming out party. Some parents do need more time to adjust, so not to have massive expectations if you are coming out. But as well, again, as the others were saying, that we're very lucky that we can create this chosen family. There's like a massive community of people out there that are there to support us and mentor us, and that we're very lucky that we do get that opportunity to choose who we want around us and to choose, I suppose, who we want to share our own love with and who can give us that support as well. So I think that's kind of me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Conrad, for sharing your story. It's so encouraging, actually. We kind of picked the order of speakers kind of randomly, but I think it's really nice to kind of end on a story where, you know, your mom was like a bit dismissive of the whole coming out thing, which is, I suppose, it's encouraging to see that that's kind of the direction that we might be heading. Of course, not going to be the same for everyone, but yeah, it's quite nice to hear that from your point of view. So yeah.